رسول الله يا حبيب الله يا رسول الله يا حبيب الله يا نور عيني يا
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Welcome back, my dear children, to the 24th episode of our series in the garden of the beloved Prophet's life sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Today's topic is the journey to Al-Taa'if. How are you, my dear friends? I'm sure you're excited to know what happened to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his journey to Al-Taa'if that he began secretly, as no one accompanied him except Zayd ibn Haritha, and they traveled on foot. When the Prophet ﷺ reached Al-Taa'if, he met with its leaders, and they were 3 brothers, and they answered him with mockery and rejection to believing in him or supporting him. So he asked them to conceal his news and not spread the word about his arrival, so that problems with Quraysh do not become worse. And they denied this request as well, and they ordered him to leave. And they also ordered their slaves and their servants to stand on his way out sallallahu alaihi wasallam and throw rocks at him. Zayd ibn Haritha, may Allah be pleased with him, protected the Prophet with his own body when leaving the city until his head was split open. And when the rocks hit the legs of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they made them bleed. So he sought refuge with his companion Zayd in a garden owned by 2 men from Quraysh. So the Prophet and Zayd ibn Haritha remained there to collect themselves, and they prayed, and the Prophet ﷺ made dua to Allah, grieving what he had been through and what he had faced from the people of Al-Taa'if. The owners of the garden saw the Prophet from afar, and they recognized him, and they felt bad for his situation, so they sent a servant named Addas with some grapes to the Prophet ﷺ. And when the Prophet reached his hand to the grapes, he said, Bismillah. And Addas became curious, and he said, "This is not a saying from this land." And the Prophet asked him, "And where are you from?" And he answered, "From Nainawa." And the Prophet replied, "Oh, the land of the good man Yunus bin Matta." And Addas was very surprised, and he asked the Prophet, "How do you know of Yunus bin Matta?" And the Prophet answered, "He was a prophet, and I am a prophet." And when the servant heard this, he began to kiss the hands of the Prophet and his head and his bloodied feet, and he believed in him and converted to Islam. The Prophet ﷺ left Al-Taa'if and he headed back to Mecca, sad and sorrowful because his trip was unsuccessful, as the people of Al-Taa'if, men and women, did not convert, and instead they hurt him and they pushed him away. But despite all that, the Prophet did not make dua upon them, and instead he made dua for them to have offspring who worship Allah alone. And when he reached near Mecca, Zayd, may Allah be pleased with him, asked the Prophet, "How will you enter after you had been forced to leave, and Quraysh knows of your interaction with the people of Al-Taa'if?" So the Prophet answered him confidently that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring relief, and that he will make his religion and his Prophet victorious. And then he sent a man from Khuza'a to Al-Mu'tam bin Adi, who was one of the leaders of Quraysh, asking him if the Prophet can enter Mecca under his protection. And Al-Mu'tam answered his request, and he declared in front of Quraysh that he has sided with Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And so the Prophet entered Mecca with Zayd, may Allah be pleased with him, and they circled around the Kaaba, where the Prophet ﷺ prayed 2 rak'ahs with the sons of Al-Mu'tam surrounding the Prophet to protect him until he reached his home. The Prophet ﷺ continued with the da'wah to Islam patiently, and he was confident in Allah's victory. And then a strange event and a miracle from Allah occurred in that year, confirming his prophethood and honoring him after long years of Quraysh disbelieving in him and harming him. So what happened to our beloved Prophet? And what is the new trip that he went on? And what is the story of Al-Isra and Al-Mi'raj? This is inshallah what we will know in the next episode of our series, so stay tuned and I will see you, my dear friends.